Holly Wampler, Director of Brand Experience and Creative Merchandising at Shake Shack. Welcome to Marketing Girly.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you on and jump through your career journey. Holly has had quite the path to working in marketing at Shake Shack. She's worked at Walmart previously to Madewell, and then now obviously is in food. So excited to dive into all of that. But before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Holly. I'm originally from Indianapolis and I live in Brooklyn in New York now, and I've been here for 10 years, which is crazy. And just, I think me as a person, I am very kind of like a left brain, right brain kind of person. I'm super creative. I've always been drawn to the arts. I grew up as a dancer and I have so many artistic, creative hobbies now. I sing, I do interior design, and that's just such a big part of who I am, but I'm also very analytical. My background and what I studied in school is very academic, and I wanted to be a professor. Yeah, crazy.
What do you want to teach?
So I studied rhetorical studies and media studies, and I really specialized in media and pop culture and identity in pop culture. So I wanted to be a professor and teach in that space. So I have a very sort of like analytical, sort of academic mind, and I love a good deep dive. And so there's just a lot of parts of me that I've been super fortunate to bring to my career. And I really kind of think of myself as like a lifestyle merchandiser. And so I've been in the home space and the fashion space, and now I'm in the food space. And I really love categories that feel really emotional for people and are things that are kind of extensions of their own identity and their own universe and kind of how they create and curate their life. And yeah, it's just like what I'm really passionate about. And yeah, like you said, I am at Shake Shack now. I've been there for 3 years, and my role is leading our brand experience and creative merchandising function.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that look like? Can you give me like a day or week in the... I know every day or week is different, but give me like a little sneak peek into what your role
For
looks
sure.
like.
So my role has a lot of like breadth and depth to it. And kind of the way that I explain it is my role as a merchandiser at a food brand, especially a brand that doesn't do kind of like classic buying and merchandising like you might see at a home or fashion brand, is my role is really to kind of speak the languages of both sides of the business. So my background is a buyer, so I have a very strong understanding of how to drive a business, how to drive a P&L. So speaking the business side of the language of the business side, but then also the creative side, and working really closely with our creative directors, our art directors, and design teams, and really kind of figuring out what is the best way to translate the brand strategy and make it manifest in the actual experience across all of our different channels, and how do we make it elevated and hospitable and true to our brand, but also really make it make sense and drive our business at the end of the day. So I oversee our menu and our product merchandising across all our channels. So in our shacks, in our drive-throughs, and in digital. And then I also oversee our team attire program, which is actually really interesting and fun, packaging, and then our merch and kind of retail side of the business. So I do our merch store and any sort of like partnerships and collaborations in the merch space. So a lot of stuff.
Okay. Can
Yeah.
you maybe walk us through or share like a favorite campaign of yours that you've done recently?
Yeah, I think a project that I really, really loved recently that I'm super proud of. So we launched this back in the beginning of the year. So it's been out in the market for a little while. But my favorite thing that I've done is at Shake Shack is really kind of reinventing and reimagining our menu boards. Like when you go into a restaurant, you kind of see traditional sort of big menu panels of like all the items that are just all line listed. And it's really overwhelming as a guest. And you kind of have this sort of like analysis paralysis, and it sort of stops you in your tracks. And so my role was like, what about like, what if we just like completely rethink the role that this plays in our experience? And like, we're so digitally enabled now. And so what does it look like if our menu boards are actually additive to that experience rather than duplicative of that experience? Because if you think about it, a lot of that information exists on your kiosk and on your phones. And so I'm like, how can this strategy be complementary to that and not just like repeating the same information? So we tested and we launched a totally new strategy where we kind of treat our menu panels like gallery walls now. So it's super high impact, super visual. It's showing off like beautiful premium ingredients of all of our really culinary forward builds. And it really kind of tells the story and the quality and the why of why we made that menu item and why it's so because we have really, really high quality standards and sort of telling that story. And also just thinking about the ambiance of the restaurant too, where it's like it truly feels like a gallery wall that's complementary to the space and is showcasing to a guest like what's new and exciting at Shake Shack and kind of hoping to like drive a little bit of that crave. So that work has been super fun and working with our creative team to bring that to life. Our creative team is so talented. So it's been super fun to just think through just like how do we completely reimagine that strategy and do something new that nobody in QSR is doing and think about it through the lens of more of like a lifestyle brand, like maybe how somebody would execute it in fashion or in beauty, but bring that to food.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
exciting.
Thanks.
So what does it look like? Because let's say you guys are deciding, okay, we want to change the menu up.
Yeah.
I can imagine that's a huge thing. Like the menu is very essential to somebody's
Totally.
experience coming into Shake Shack and
Yeah.
ordering. So what does that process look? You mentioned like we had this idea that we wanted to, eliminate analysis paralysis, but are those changes rooted in data? Are you guys talking to customers? How are you testing it? Because
Yeah.
I can imagine there's also risk behind making a change like that.
Totally. I mean, it's kind of all of the above. We did a ton of kind of wayfinding research, trying to really understand how guests kind of move through our shacks, how they make their decisions. And so it's rooted in a lot of that for sure. But then it's also really rooted in kind of what kind of experience do we want to create as a brand? And how does this really important piece of collateral actually like contribute to that experience? So it was a really cool, and we have an amazing team of like UX designers who just specialize in guest experience and how people process information and make decisions. And so working with them and then building out sort of like what does that structure look like? And then also creatively, like what's the best expression for our brand that feels different and special. So yeah, it was a ton of like really cool discovery work that was really rooted in kind of equal parts research and insights, but also just creative strategy and more forward looking rather than kind of looking back and looking around. Yeah. And then we go through like a process of testing and really understanding kind of what the impact looks like before we make a decision to, take it to national.
Yeah. Okay. Super
Yeah.
interesting. Well, before we dive more into that, let's rewind a little bit about how you
Yeah.
kind of got into this space, because you mentioned that you wanted to be a professor at the beginning, but you ended up starting your career at Walmart.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Oh my God, so crazy. So it's so funny because like, at the time you're like in your early 20s and just your decision-making processes are so different. But like I mentioned, I'm from Indianapolis. I went to IU and I always wanted to live in New York. And I had this amazing internship experience at Unilever when I was a junior in college, and I was determined no matter what, I'm moving to New York. But then I kind of was like, okay, well, I'm really interested in academia and I love that space and that sort of like challenging spirit of intellectual curiosity and just learning from your peers. But I was like, but I want to live in New York and I maybe like don't, and like, I was like, how can I do that? And, not be broke. So I don't know. I kind of was like, okay, well, maybe it might look different. Like to get to New York was really like my number one priority. And I was like, maybe it just like looks different in the first step that I take. But honestly, I kind of stumbled into the role at Walmart, if I'm honest with you. And I think it was sort of a series of lucky events that happened. And I'll try to voice it over quickly. But essentially, when I was in undergrad, I was in this women in business organization, and we had an opportunity to have mentorships with MBA students. So I met this really amazing woman at an event that I remember going to this event and being like, I don't want to go. And you know that feeling where you're just like, I just want to like go home. I want to put on some Netflix.
Me, every time I have plans.
No, same. Me too. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, I don't want to go. But I was like, I really like pushed myself to go and to show up. And it's funny in hindsight how those moments kind of just influence your trajectory in ways that you don't expect. But I went to this event and I met this woman and I was like, and we just really hit it off and we really got on. And and she's like, what do you want to do with your career? What are your goals? And at the time I was like, I'm really interested in CPG. And, I think it would be really awesome to be at like a CPG or like a L'Oreal, because of course, I love beauty as a person and wanted to live in New York. And I was like, oh, and like a Unilever would be interesting. And she was like, well, as it so happens, my twin sister's boyfriend is in HR at Unilever, and I know that they're hiring for their internship program right now. And she was like, you should send me your resume, and like I'll send it over.
Oh my gosh.
And it's because and they normally recruit at like very prestigious schools, and IU is an awesome school, but especially in the Midwest, I think it's not really like totally on their radar. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I sent it over and I ended up getting an interview and I ended up getting this internship at Unilever. And it was funny because my roommate at the time, and they kind of randomly assign you to teams. And remember my roommate at the time, she got assigned to the, of course, like the team. She was on the global Dove beauty brand,
Oh,
and
wow.
I got put on the e-commerce team. And at the time, I was like, "What the hell is e-commerce?" I was like, "I don't even know what that is." And I remember getting this email and being so confused. And I'm like, and also like my friend was like, "Damn!" I'm like, "You got like the coolest placement." And I was like, "That's the one that I wanted." And I remember just being like, "How did I land here?" And then I get to Unilever, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're the e-commerce intern, and like e-commerce is the new sexy thing that this is what in 2016 it's like e-commerce is the new sexy thing that like we're really investing in and really excited about." And I was like, okay, I'm like, so this is actually a cool thing. And so I was on the e-commerce side of the business and I made a friend in the program, and she needed some help with just one of her projects, and we became friends. And then afterwards, after we both left the program, she reached out to me one day and she was like, "Hey," at the time Walmart had bought Jet, and was like, "Hey, I saw that they're recruiting for an e-commerce like buyer, and it's in New York, and I remember that you said you wanted to move to New York." And I was like, "Okay, cool," because they weren't coming to my school. And so I applied, and that's kind of how I stumbled. It's just like I feel like in your early in your career, just like really showing up and giving yourself more surface area for opportunities to happen is so important, because all of those opportunities sort of like compound in ways that you don't expect, and just kind of gets you into like an interesting, like fun place.
Yeah, how incredible. And I always love saying that you can create your own luck in your life and
Yes.
you just kind of put yourself out there and put yourself in opportunities to meet people that led to amazing opportunities for yourself, which is incredible.
Yeah. And then I ended up at Walmart, and at the time they were building out this kind of pilot program for the retail side of their business, and for buyers. And I got put on this team, and it was and the team and the leaders on the team were so talented, and they were like the best of the best in the business. And so I had this amazing opportunity to learn from these incredible leaders that are people that, I still really look up to today, and just taught me so much. And then again, like all of that stuff sort of like set the tone and the direction for my career, and sort of where I am now. But honestly, I kind of look back on it, I'm like, it's sort of just this happy accident where it's like I really wanted to come to New York, and just through just sort of lucky things sort of ended up at Walmart.
So you started at Walmart as an e-commerce buyer.
Yeah.
So what did that look like?
Yeah, so I was a baby furniture buyer, which was so funny to me because I was like, again, I was like, how did I end up here? So basically it looked like, and again, sort of out of school when I'm like 22, I have ownership of this like massive multi-million dollar business. And I was like, in hindsight, I'm like, who let me do that?
Who put me in charge?
Yeah, so a lot of it was really like, and I also worked really collaboratively with our store buyer as well, but really primarily owned sort of like the category strategy and direction. It's like, what brands are we going after? What does our assortment strategy look like? Private label was a big part of that category, which is really fun because that's like product development. And I'm such a product girly, and I love product.
Can you explain private label for those who don't know?
Yeah, so private label is essentially where it can be a couple of different things, but it's essentially like where you have a partner. In this case, we had some vendors that we basically like worked collaboratively on an exclusive product that was co-branded as both theirs and ours, and we got to kind of design it from the ground up, and do something special. So I guess that's what private label like meant in that context.
Got it.
Yeah, where it's just like it's basically like the process of creating something that's kind of exclusively yours. That's sort of like an internal in-house kind of label.
Yeah. So you are doing the buying, and what, for people who don't really understand maybe the buying side on, because you were buying for e-commerce. No?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's like, yeah. So I was owning the e-commerce side of the business, and then like there's like kind of like an omni-channel sort of partnership, because then we had like store counterparts.
Got it.
So it was kind of like a dual sort of strategy, and especially for the business that I was in as well, because there were some businesses that were really like e-commerce only, but my business had a store footprint. So it was like a very collaborative process to make sure that the omni-channel experience was strong and consistent, and you're getting the right brands, the right product in the right channels. to make sure that it reaches the right guest.
Okay. And then what was your kind of biggest learning from this time at Walmart?
Uh, I actually have a really good story about this.
Yay.
So I think one of my biggest learnings that I think has really served me well throughout my entire career is really the skill of looking to see like where is a white space in the business that I'm interested in, and how do I really attack that and be really resourceful and build something end to end that I can point to and show as just as evidence of how I can think through something creatively and strategically and make it real. And I think one thing I really love about your content is that you talk a lot about portfolios and having a body of work that showcases the way that you think and how you approach something. And I was able to do that really early in my career. And I think that was so helpful and really helped me like differentiate and stand out.
Have a portfolio too?
Well, so I was able to really kind of execute my first big portfolio piece when I was at Walmart.
Okay.
So the story goes, so at the time, Walmart was really focused on elevating the online experience and having a more curated and editorial point of view. Because when you're a retailer that has a huge assortment, the best way to help people navigate it is by really curating and having some sort of editorial sort of experience. And so they were investing a lot at the time in building this out for home and for fashion. And I also think I was learning at the time where it's like, if I'm not in the driver's seat of my career and I'm not looking actively for opportunities that I'm excited about to fill my plate, things are going to come on my plate that like maybe I don't want to do.
That's a great perspective to have.
Yeah. So I was like, I need to be the one that finding the thing, raising my hand and filling my own plate with things that I'm excited about. So, and a lot of there was a lot about being a buyer that I loved. And there was a lot of things that, maybe weren't my jam. And I'm like, I really am drawn to this like creative product side of this and don't want to be stuck in spreadsheets all day. So I'm like, so how can I find an opportunity to do that? And so at the time I was seeing this larger thing happen in the business that wasn't quite making its way over to baby. And in my head, I'm like, well, why not? I'm like, we have the same problem and the same opportunity where it's like we have all of this amazing product from all these amazing brands, and like we don't have a great way for people to feel inspired and discover it. And so I went to my boss at the time, who was he's super sharp, and he spent his entire career pretty much at Target at the time. And I went to him and I pitched him this idea. I'm like, well, home and fashion are doing all of these curated experiences where they're making all this compelling, creative, and building site experiences around. I'm like, why don't we do the same thing in baby? And I'm like, we have a huge opportunity to do this in nursery and to showcase the best of our assortment and to capture this new mom and kind of customer that's super valuable. And he sort of like, not in a mean way, but he kind of like laughed in my face. He's like, well, we don't have any budget. I'm like, he's like, how are you going to do that? He's like, if you can figure it out, great, do it. And so I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. And so basically, I was like, how could I do this with no money? And so I went to all of our vendors, I mean, marketing and advertising space on Walmart is incredibly valuable because it's so high trafficked and it gets so many eyes. So I thought in my head, I was like, okay, I can partner with my vendors who have all these creative studios to shoot all of this content and create this experience. And like, basically like they would pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for, ad placements. And I'm like, well, why don't they just shoot it for me for free? And so I basically pitched all these vendors. I'm like, you can be a part of this like brand new curated experience that's like spotlighting your brand and your products in these beautiful way, but just like, let me shoot it. And they were like, sure. And like for them, that's a great deal. They were like, that's probably, a better investment of those dollars anyways.
So wait, so let me just to make sure I understand. So you're trying to put together on the website, instead of just like going to the baby section on the Walmart website and there just being like a ton of products, you wanted to kind of have more of a like lifestyle photo shoot?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So we wanted to create, because we had all these awesome insights around what trends people were gravitating towards and what was kind of coming up in the marketplace. But I'm like, we didn't have any assets to showcase that point of view. And so it's like we just had these giant PLPs, product landing pages of product. And I'm like, well, we could build an actual experience around like a shoppable nursery. And we could have all of these like beautiful images that then populate the site experiences, all those things, plus other things that are inspired by that. And like it can be a discovery tool.
Okay. So then you're going to the brands and you're pitching them this vision. And then are they shooting the product, or you're asking them for budget so you can shoot?
No, well, so basically I just like, hey, I will use your product. Like I can use your product as heroes. Of course, like mixing in other things 'cause it has to have an editorial point of view, but just let me have access to your creative studio and like shoot this for us. And they were like, sure. And I was like, excellent. So basically what I did is I built, so using all the data, the guest insights and sort of like the actual category data at the time, I built out all of these different kind of like trends that were already there, but were also emerging, and like created actual merchandise collections around them. So at the time, like boho chic was really popping off, which is so funny to say now. Like, so like, and then there was a lot of like gender neutral that was becoming a lot more popular. And this idea of like, I mean, gray at the time was very popular with like pops of color. So basically I kind of had basically like built out this merchandising framework for this, and creative directed and art directed and styled and picked all the product for how do all these things come to life, and then worked with our UX team to actually build out a site experience that kind of was mirroring what we were doing in these other big strategic categories, and launched this thing. And it really kind of blew up in a way that I didn't expect. And it got a ton of press pickup, and it generated an incremental like millions of dollars.
Oh my God.
And so it was one of those things where like, and I was able to point to it and be like, I did all of this sort of end to end, and this was the result.
How did that feel when it was so successful? Were you scared before launch? Like, oh my gosh, I just, had all these people work on this thing. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? And like, how did it feel when it did?
I had no expectations going into it. And honestly, I kind of was just like, I had so much fun doing this, and I really enjoyed it. And so even if it didn't do anything, it was a great experience. So when it went live and it happened, I was just really surprised. And I was like, oh my God, wow. And so it was just an awesome win, and just an awesome moment. And I think it was really affirming for me, where I'm like, oh, I am a really creative person, and look at all this that I just did that I'm feeling really proud of. So I feel like that really sort of launched my career, because I was able to point to something that, had an actual like impact on the business that I could then kind of use as the basis for my portfolio going forward.
That's incredible. And I also love how this started with you, with that, what you had mentioned of saying, I want my plate to be full of things that I'm passionate about.
Yes.
So I'm going to fill my plate myself, versus just like letting my boss or like other company priorities like determine what I'm doing, which I think is incredible advice.
Yeah. It's like, I think whatever you're doing should always kind of ladder up to a larger strategy and drive the business. So like you kind of like, because it can't just be like an arbitrary thing that like you have to make the case for it. But I think, especially when you're starting in your career, before that, you're in school, and in school, you're given an assignment. You do the assignment. It's graded in a rubric, and that's just very different than how it actually works when you start to build your career. And I remember his boss that I mentioned that had been at Target. I remember he said to me earlier in my career, he's like, you need to, and I would just kind of show up at my one-on-ones being like, what's up? And he's like, you need to like have a point of view and like things that you're looking at and that you're excited about, or bringing me like thoughts or solutions. He's like, you always need to be taking a first pass at things. And I remember being like a little bit like, oh wow, okay, like this is a different mindset, and is a different environment than school, and like I have to operate in a different way, and what made me successful there is not going to make me successful here.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, thank you. I just think overall, I think from that experience, and I think something that served me really well is, and what I always say to people who are earlier in their career that reach out to me, I'm like, being resourceful is one of the most valuable skills I think that people can have, because a lot of times you're not going to be in a perfect situation with all the resources, all the budget, and being able to really just roll your sleeves up and build that sort of like figure it out muscle, I feel like is so important.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're always just waiting around for the right things to be in place, it may never happen, and you may never like be able to kind of create those opportunities.
Absolutely. And also you would think working at Walmart, you'd have unlimited budget, because Walmart's such a big company. Like you wouldn't think that you would be told like, you don't have budget for this. So I love that this happened to you at a big company like that, and that you were still able to say, okay, like I'm going to make it happen. Did you have Do you have any tips for somebody who is like, okay, I have like a million ideas. I'm inspired. I'm going to go to my boss and tell them something that I really think again would ladder
Hmm.
up to business success that I
Yeah.
would love to work on. Do you have any tips, one, for pitching it to your boss? And then
Mm,
two, even if your boss says yes, you have to go sell it to everybody else because everybody else on the team has to work to help your vision come to life. So any
totally.
advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being really thoughtful and just having a really tight pitch, like being really aware of kind of what are the larger goals that you're working towards as a business. And then I think just coming with a point of view. And I think the more that you can kind of flesh out that point of view, I think like mock-ups or rough skeletons, like just like I again like kind of what my boss was saying was like always take a first pass at something and have something for us to jump off of and for me to react to and for us to workshop together. So I think really kind of taking a first pass at what it would look like and kind of fleshing it out is super helpful for getting someone to kind of see your vision. And then I think to your point about sort of how do you cross functionally bring people in. I mean, also too, I did not do this alone, by the way. I mean, we had an amazing other team of buyers that I was consulting for their own expertise on, their own category is what was resonating really well. And I think when you respect people's expertise and want people's opinion, people are responsive to that and people want to contribute. And I think just creating an environment that where people can bring their own expertise and point of view that can kind of help formulate the larger direction, I think is always just really valuable and makes people want to work with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
incredible. Okay, so this has kind of launched your career. And then you said, did you build a portfolio, or did you kind of use this just as an example in interviews on your resume?
No, so I mean, that was kind of the basis for my portfolio. And then I think because I did this work, I got the opportunity to work on the jet side of the business because they were similarly doing a large relaunch. And they were like, hey, we're shooting all this stuff for home. And like, you have this expertise in the home space and you know what's working well. And they're like, can you curate? Can you like basically like build out these rooms and can you style them and can you tell us like what sort of buckets that we should be hitting? And so I had all of those assets and that site experience. And so I walked out of Walmart/Jet with like two really big bodies of work that I was able to point to and say, I did all look at all this amazing work that I was able to do individually and also with a team that drove a business. And I really think that that kind of helped me get my role at Madewell.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Tell me about Madewell.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, so I joined Madewell when I was 25, and also in hindsight, I'm like, who let me do that job? So I left Walmart and Jet, and I joined Madewell, and at the time they were looking. I mean, so Madewell is a brand that's owned by J. Crew and is underneath like the J. Crew umbrella, and Mickey Drexler was the founder of J. Crew and kind of like the head merchant, and they called him like the merchant prince. And he is such an incredible merchant, and like really kind of the bread and the butter of their business is really like the store business. And they were really, and each e-commerce is a big channel for them, but they were looking for somebody who had, strong digital merchandising experience that could take what they were doing in store and thread that needle through in a compelling way to their e-commerce channel. So they were looking for somebody to kind of like stand up side, kind of like the site merchandising, digital merchandising side of their business. And so I think I was able to get that job because I had all of this work that I kind of use as a portfolio. I actually remember I put it literally in a portfolio and borrowed my friend's iPad and took it into
I
the
love
meeting. I took it into the
that.
meeting and I was like walking people through it.
I
And I
love
think
that.
I really think that people respond really well to having something visual that shows just the full evolution of like the way that you think and the way that you execute is really helpful.
Would you recommend that today someone bring an iPad into an interview and walk the interview through their portfolio?
I mean, not no. I mean, especially if you're on the creative side of your business, I just think that most people are visual learners. And especially when when someone's like, tell me about a time when you launched a campaign, having a visual, I think is just so strong and really helps tell the story and helps people really understand. So honestly, I would.
Okay, I love
I
it.
would.
So I know a lot of us know Madewell. I've shopped Madewell. I've shopped in store. I've shopped online. So
Hmm.
how does your role in merchandising come into play?
Yeah. So I sat on the team, the merchandising team, and I reported into the head of merchandising at Madewell. And she is an absolute master of her craft, like truly one of the best who have ever done it. And so again, like in hindsight, I'm like, wow, how did I even like at 25 just stumble into this opportunity to work with like such an amazing team. So really like again, my role was kind of like speaking, really bridging the gap and speaking both the language of both sides of the business. So it's like I sat on the merchandising team, but I had a lot of digital experience and was able to work really collaboratively with like the digital ops team, and then also had a great relationship with the creative side of our business as well. So I kind of, my role was really kind of combining all of those worlds to really understand like how do we build our collections. I mean, we launched product every 2 weeks, so it's like how do we successfully roll out all of this product? How does the creative look? What styles and what categories are we elevating, and do we want our girl to see first and engage with first and get excited about? And it's like, are there trends that we're seeing that we can respond to and create collections around that we can then do a lot of just marketing around that we can drive somebody to? So it was really, like I said, it was really about like kind of combining all of those worlds and just pulling through kind of what we were doing in store to come to life online.
Is there anything for those of us who shop online all the time that we might not think about or know that goes behind like the curation that we see on an e-commerce site?
Oh, it's so curated, and it's so well, at least a good experience I think is curated, and it's kind of really about blending sort of kind of what you're seeing from a data perspective, but then also kind of what a creative point of view is and kind of like what are you moving towards. So it's all very, or at least it should be, it's all very curated. And it's so funny because I used to just be so picky about it. And I'm like, I want all the color, like if there are 4 products in a row, I'm like, I want all those color stories to like work really beautifully together. Or there might be a look that was in the creative that I really loved. And I was like, okay, let's like put all these pieces together. And so like when you're shopping as a guest, it's just like pleasing to the eye and it feels inspiring and beautiful.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love talking about positions like this because we all shop online and you might not really think that there's a lot of intention behind what you're seeing. You might just be like, there's products here and I'm looking at them, but there's a team behind that that's deciding what you're seeing and how that looks and what that experience is like.
Yeah. No, it's all, like I said, it's honestly really fun, I think. It's like kind of making your own, I always thought about it as like making your own Pinterest board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think I know you kind of mentioned this, but creativity is a big part of merchandising, or kind of what is the skill set that you feel like makes you really successful?
Yeah, I think it's like really having a really strong eye and a really good just sense of editing. The classically trained kind of Mickey merchandisers in the J. Crew world are really, really good at editing and curating, and just having a really strong understanding of who your girl is and what is the lens of what she wants. And like they have the way that they think is so interesting, and it's such a valuable framework that has been so valuable to me even in other categories, like beyond just being in fashion. And it's something I reference a lot, like even in food, where it's like if you're thinking about kind of like what occasions does she care about, what's the end use of it, and how is she building her wardrobe. And it's like if we're bringing back a style that maybe we did last year, how does it feel new and fresh? And like, what's a colorway that's additive to her wardrobe that she may not have today, but still works with other things that she has in her closet? So I just think that point of view and that thinking framework is super valuable. And I also think like being a merchant, it's so important to be cross-functional, because a lot of times, like whether you're doing a little bit more of what I was doing, like digitally, or you're at Madewell, what I was doing, or like at Walmart where I was more of a buyer, it's like you're always working cross-functionally, whether it's with supply chain or production or design or digital or creative or marketing. It's like super, super, super cross-functional. So I think that's like those soft skills I think are super important.
Yeah. Okay. And then how about your biggest lessons learned at Madewell?
So I think like at the time I had come from a Fortune 1 company, Walmart. And so being at a more sort of like nimble, scrappy organization, I really felt like I was kind of like forged in the fire and just really learned how to move quickly and collaboratively. And it was just a completely different pace and experience. And I think I just really was able to develop my kind of taste and point of view even more when I was there, because I was surrounded by people who were so much cooler than me. And just like really, I think just like it's just one of those things where it's like you learn so much by osmosis. But I also think that's also really where I learned a lot about, I think, just being a pleasure to work with. And to me, it doesn't always mean being a people pleaser or being like, a quote unquote like nice girl, but it just means being somebody that that shows up, that's consistent, that has a point of view, that is reliable and resourceful, and just someone that, people are like walk away and are like, that was a good experience of working with that person. And like that,
Yeah.
it really goes a long way in kind of building relationships, I think.
Yeah, I think that's incredible advice. Being a pleasure. I like how you phrase it too. Being a pleasure to work with.
Yeah, and it's like again,
Yeah.
like I think it's just an important distinction to make because it's not always like being a people pleaser or a yes man, but it's just like what's your point of view and always like showing up and contributing and doing what you say that you're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what brought you to Shake Shack?
What brought me to Shake Shack? Yeah, so my background, like I said, was in home and in fashion and so different. And I never saw myself in food necessarily. I mean, like I love food, and it's I think most people do because you need it to survive.
Yes.
But I think what I really liked about Shake Shack and what really drew me to Shake Shack is that as a brand, they're very elevated and artful, and I felt like they had kind of a lifestyle point of view on food that felt really unique in the space. And so it's like the way that they shoot food is super artistic. They work with local artists a lot to create special artwork for different activations or different shacks. And we have an amazing interior design team at Shake Shack that makes all of our shacks feel really elevated and beautiful and like a place that you like really want to sit down and have a great experience. So I was really drawn to that. And at the time, my boss at Shake Shack who hired me, incredible. He came from and he had come from Vice. And I think that he really valued people who had different experiences and could bring a different a different and a fresh point of view. And so I was really drawn to that opportunity. And I really, and my role at Shake Shack is super omni-channel. So like I said, I oversee the brand expression in our shacks in drive-through and in digital. And I had some omni-channel experience in the past, but I was really excited about having a very, very clear omni-channel scope and honestly, like probably skewing a little bit more to the in-person and the physical. And I was super excited about that opportunity. And it was one of those things where it's like I walked in and everyone that I met was so smart and so much fun to work with and so kind. And it just felt really right.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that kind of your diverse background helped you in this position. Do you find that the skills are like what's kind of universal lesson that you've learned now working across so many different industries about consumer behavior or about merchandising?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I think again, like I think in a lot of these categories, like I think that people want things that are that feel like a reflection of themselves and their tastes and their preferences. And I think just bringing something to life in a fun, experiential, and special way is just super valuable. And like I think a lot of times, like in different categories, it can be really easy to just kind of like look at the competitive set and be like, what are they doing? But just like I actually think also too, my experience in home and fashion, I think, like I said, I kind of earlier on this project, I was really proud of it. It helped me bring a different perspective to a different category and think about it in a different way that other people in the space might not.
Yeah. And what's your favorite order at Shake Shack?
My favorite order at Shake
Yeah,
Shack?
what's
Oh my
your Shake
God.
Shack order?
Such a good question. So I love our Smoke Shack. So our Smoke Shack is our take on a bacon cheese burger. But it has pickled cherry peppers on it, which is kind of like a special ingredient that is pretty unique to Shake Shack. And have you ever had one before?
I have not.
They're really like tangy and they have like a nice little kick to it, which I really like. And then I love our 50/50. So we have our 50/50 is our core lemonade and an iced tea. And then right now we have really fun boba flavors, which I love to
You
have.
guys put boba right now?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my
we have boba.
gosh.
So I like to put boba in it for like a fun little afternoon treat. But also, so that's like from our core menu. But right now we have an amazing barbecue baby back rib sandwich that is honestly, I had it and I was like, this is restaurant quality. Like this is insane.
Wow.
And it's super delicious.
Okay.
So that campaign was also really fun to work on.
Okay. Some good things to try. Love it. And then how about in terms of trends that you're seeing right now in the industry, but in terms of merchandising, anything that you're excited about, anything that you are trying to learn a lot about?
Yeah. So I think right now, I think especially after COVID and just with the rise of AI, I feel like the pendulum is really swinging back towards in-person experiences and analog expressions. And I'm really excited about that. And I think that that's super fun. And I also think just creatively, again, now with like the introduction of AI, you're seeing a lot more sort of like hand-drawn things that feel like made by a human. And I think that that is super exciting. And it's a fun thing to think about where it's like, how does that come to life in food or in fashion or in beauty? But yeah, I think the pendulum is really swinging towards like special in-person experiences, which I'm really excited for. I'm excited for that
Yeah.
renaissance.
Yeah, I would also agree. I think it's gonna make us, yeah, want the hand-drawn this or the
Hmm.
in-person experience or just more of that human touch point.
Yeah.
Have you found that AI has impacted your industry a lot, or do you feel like you haven't really seen that yet?
I think it's still kind of in the early stages for QSR specifically. And I think that everybody in all industries are really kind of trying to understand sort of where it fits in and where it makes the most sense and where it feels additive to the guest experience rather than, something that's just kind of superfluous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how about for somebody who is listening to your career journey and it sounds incredible and inspiring and they want to have a career like yours, any
Oh my
advice that
God.
you would give with them?
Yeah, I mean, after really what I said around like being resourceful and really kind of finding filling your plate with the things that you're interested in. I think the other thing is really just like, and I know a lot of people say this, but building relationships. And I think I remember when I was early in my career and there were tons of entry level people that were my age at Jet and Walmart. And I do remember looking around and we had a happy hour every Thursday that I always went to. I is blocked on my calendar. And I was like, even if I go for 30 minutes, I will show up and I will go. And I remember looking around at those events and noticing that everyone at our level was only talking to their friends at our level. And I was like, what? Like, why are we doing that? Like, and so when I was early in my career, and I always went to those things and I always was just curious or interested in meeting new people and learning about kind of what they're doing, but also just like them as people. And I met so many different people that were older than me or in different functions than me. And I had lunch or coffee with somebody different probably almost every day.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I feel like I just learned so much and I was able to sort of organically have a lot of like friends and mentors through that. And that's kind of one of my pieces of advice where it's like earnestly connecting with people from a place of curiosity and interest. And really kind of building those relationships. Because it's funny because I think even like a lot of career things for me later ended up being kind of like either brought to me by or kind of working with people that I had worked with at Judd and Walmart.
Do you have any advice? Because I've definitely been in that scenario where you want to talk to your friends. You're going to the social thing, but it's nerve-wracking to go up to somebody that's in a higher level position than you and talk to
Totally.
them. So how did you do it or how did you approach it?
Yeah, I realize that this might not be advice for everybody, but I'm a very I don't know, I kind of describe myself as sort of like an introvert or an extroverted introvert where it's like I actually feel like I am very introverted, but a lot of people who know me very well are like, "No way." But so I don't know, I kind of struggle with that too where I do think like utilizing kind of like mutual connections I think is helpful, but also like just going up to people. I think a compliment goes a long way, but an honest and a sincere compliment goes a long way. That I feel like is always a great way for because who
Yeah.
doesn't like to be complimented,
Yeah,
you
of
know?
course, of course. And then how about, so let's say that you're bold enough, you go and you talk to somebody, you compliment her on her shoes or work that she did at the
Hmm.
company. How are you then turning that into getting lunch or coffee with different people every day?
It just like I think a lot of times we're just able to, and again I feel like I was asking a lot of questions too where it's like we would sort of like start the conversation and I'd be like, what are you working on, where are you from, like where were you before you came to Walmart or Jet, and it was sort of just like build into this conversation. And a lot of times, I mean, I'm just very chatty and a very inquisitive person, so a lot of times it would sort of organically, we would both be like, we should talk more. And then
Oh,
I would just be like, great. And then a lot of times when it's like somebody that's more senior than you, they're like, okay, well, like put time on the calendar. I think a lot of people get nervous and they like don't do it, but I would always do it. I'd be
mm,
like, dit, dit, dit. I was like, I'm putting something on your calendar.
I love that. Also, I think kind of what you mentioned earlier, it's coming from a place of being curious.
Yes.
Just staying naturally curious. I feel like I'm the same way, and I feel like that's why this podcast can come super naturally. It's just because it's fun to learn about somebody else, and if you approach it from that genuine curiosity, people also love to talk about themselves, and then you are learning. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, whenever I talk about anything like this, are like, oh, like networking feels so icky. And I'm like, yeah, well, I think if you're coming to a networking event with the intention of networking, it feels icky. But if you're coming with, genuine curiosity and a place of interest, then I'm always like, what if you approach it like that, like what kind of unlocks for you and like maybe feels like a little bit easier. And I also do think sometimes like going with a friend who maybe if you're maybe not more outgoing and you have a friend that's a little bit more outgoing than you, that can also be kind of a good way to sort of like segue into it. Or I think just going to things where there's some sort of like mutual, because like a happy hour can be weird where there's like not something that like you're not having a shared experience necessarily. But I remember like sometimes they would do like speaker events and maybe like drinks afterwards, and it's like it's easy to be like, we just had the shared experience, and like, what did you think about that? Or like that was so interesting. So I think that maybe events like that where you have like some sort of shared experience that makes conversation flow easily maybe might be helpful.
Yeah. I also think it's great to go with their friend, but like what you mentioned earlier, you can't just talk to your friend the whole time.
I know, you really have to like push and challenge yourself. And I feel like I see a lot of people on social media doing sort of like audacity challenges or like like challenging themselves to do something that might scare them or like push them a little bit out of their comfort zone every day. And I think that's such a good muscle to build, especially earlier in your career. Just because there are a lot of things that require a lot of courage, and the sooner you can do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Okay, I think that's incredible advice. Is there anything else that you want to share with the marketing girlies?
Like what?
Anything you wish that you knew when you started? Any other advice for young women listening to this podcast that are starting their careers?
I think just approaching anything with curiosity, and I just also think enthusiasm goes a long way.
Yeah.
Especially I think nowadays sometimes being a nonchalant cool girl is kind of something that is like raised up as being fun, but just like it's cool to be excited about something, and it's cool to like just be enthusiastic and interested and engaged.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Holly. Well, thank you so much for coming on Marketing Girly. It has been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.